Contemporary art is art produced at the present period in time. Contemporary art includes, and develops from, postmodern art, which is itself a successor to modern art. In vernacular English, modern and contemporary are synonyms, resulting in some conflation of the terms modern art and contemporary art by non-specialists. Scope: some define contemporary art as art produced within our lifetime, recognizing that lifetimes and lifespans vary. However, there is a recognition that this generic definition is subject to specialized limitations. The classification of contemporary art as a special type of art, rather than a general adjectival phrase, goes back to the beginnings of modernism in the English-speaking world. In London, the Contemporary Art Society was founded in 1910 by the critic Roger Ferry and others, as a private society for buying works of art to place in public museums. A number of other institutions using the term were founded in the 1930s, such as in 1938 the Contemporary Art Society of Adelaide, Australia, and an increasing number after 1945. Many, like the Institute of Contemporary Art, Boston, changed their names from ones using modern art in this period, as modernism became defined as a historical art movement, and much modern art ceased to be contemporary. The definition of what is contemporary is naturally always on the move, anchored in the present with a start date that moves forward, and the works the Contemporary Art Society bought in 1910 could no longer be described as contemporary. Particular points that have been seen as marking a change in art styles include the end of World War II and the 1960s. There has perhaps been a lack of natural breakpoints since the 1960s, and definitions of what constitutes contemporary art in the 2010s vary, and are mostly imprecise. Art from the past 20 years is very likely to be included, and definitions often include art going back to about 1970, and sometimes further, especially in museum contexts, as museums which form a permanent collection of contemporary art inevitably find this aging. Many use the formulation modern and contemporary art, which avoids this problem. Smaller commercial galleries, magazines and other sources may use stricter definitions, perhaps restricting the contemporary to work from 2000 onwards. Artists who are still productive after a long career, and ongoing art movements, may present a particular issue. Galleries and critics are often reluctant to divide their work between the contemporary and non-contemporary. Institutions: the functioning of the art world is dependent on art institutions, ranging from major museums to private galleries, non-profit spaces, art schools and publishers, and the practices of individual artists, curators, collectors and philanthropists. A major division in the art world is between the for-profit and non-profit sectors, although in recent years the boundaries between for-profit private and non-profit public institutions have become increasingly blurred. Most well-known contemporary art is exhibited by professional artists at commercial contemporary art galleries, by private collectors, art auctions, corporations, publicly funded arts organizations, contemporary art museums or by artists themselves in artist-run spaces. Contemporary artists are supported by grants, awards and prizes as well as by direct sales of their work. Career artists train at art school or emerge from other fields. There are close relationships between publicly funded contemporary art organizations and the commercial sector. For instance, in 2005 the book Understanding International Art Markets and Management reported that in Britain a handful of dealers represented the artists featured in leading publicly funded contemporary art museums. Outstanding books and magazines and individual collectors can wield considerable influence. Corporations have also integrated themselves into the contemporary art world, exhibiting contemporary art within their premises, organizing and sponsoring contemporary art awards, and building up extensive corporate collections. Corporate advertisers frequently use the prestige associated with contemporary art and cool hunting to draw the attention of consumers to luxury goods. The institutions of art have been criticized for regulating what is designated as contemporary art. Outsider art, for instance, is literally contemporary art, in that it is produced in the present day. However, one critic has argued it is not considered so because the artists are self-taught and are thus assumed to be working outside of an art historical context. Craft activities, such as textile design, are also excluded from the realm of contemporary art, despite large audiences for exhibitions. Art critic Peter Timms has said that attention is drawn to the way that craft objects must subscribe to particular values in order to be admitted to the realm of contemporary art. A ceramic object that is intended as a subversive comment on the nature of beauty is more likely to fit the definition of contemporary art than one that is simply beautiful. At any one time, a particular place or group of artists can have a strong influence on subsequent contemporary art. For instance, the Ferris Gallery was a commercial gallery in Los Angeles and reinvigorated the Californian contemporary art scene in the late 50s and the 60s. Public attitudes. Contemporary art can sometimes seem at odds with a public that does not feel that art and its institutions share its values. In Britain, in the 1990s, contemporary art became a part of popular culture, with artists becoming stars, but this did not lead to a hoped-for cultural utopia. Some critics like Julian Spalding and Donald Cuspit have suggested that skepticism, even rejection, is a legitimate and reasonable response to much contemporary art. Brian Ashby, in an essay called Art Bollocks, criticizes much installation art, photography, conceptual art, video and other practices generally called postmodern as being too dependent on verbal explanations in the form of theoretical discourse. Concerns. A common concern since the early part of the 20th century has been the question of what constitutes art. In the contemporary period, the concept of avant-garde may come into play in determining what art is taken notice of by galleries, museums, and collectors. Propaganda and entertainment in some circumstances have been regarded as art genres during the contemporary art period. Prizes, some competitions, awards, and prizes in contemporary art are: Emerging Artist Award awarded by the Aldrich Contemporary Art Museum, Hugo Boss Prize awarded by the Solomon Guggenheim Museum, Factor Prize in Southern Art, Kandinsky Prize for Russian artists under 30, Turner Prize for British artists under 50, Gender and Registered Trademark Kulipeka 1/2 Award for Czech artists under 35, participation in the Whitney Biennial, Vincent Award, the Vincent van Gogh Biennial Award for Contemporary Art in Europe, founded by the Brouwer Charitable Foundation and hosted by Stedelijk Museum Amsterdam. Marcel Duchamp Prize awarded by ADIAF and Centre Pompidou. The Winifred Shantz Award for Ceramists, awarded by the Canadian Clay and Glass Gallery, Ricard Prize for a French artist under 40. Dest Prize for Young Greek Artists, held every 2 years. Funded by Dakis Jono. John Maria Euro Unregistered Trademark S Painting Prize, History. This table lists art movements and styles by decade. It should not be assumed to be conclusive. See also, acculturation, anti-art and anti-art, criticism of postmodernism, classificatory disputes about art, list of contemporary art museums, list of contemporary artists, medium specificity, reductive art, value theory, notes. References: Smith, Terry. What is Contemporary Art? Chicago, University of Chicago Press. ISBN 0226764311. Retrieved April 26, 2013 at ISBN 9780226764313. Further reading: Christine Stiles and Peter Howard Saltz, Theories and Documents of Contemporary Art, a Sourcebook of Artists' Writings, ISBN 0-520-20251-1. Pascal Guillen, The Murmuring of the Artistic Multitude, Global Art, Memory and Post-Fordism. Vallis, Amsterdam. Isabel Loring Wallace and Jenny Hirsch, Contemporary Art and Classical Myth. Farnham, Ashgate, ISBN 978-0-7546-6974-6.